On a night full of upsets, we saw Mammoth comeback as 3 games needed overtime or a shootout. Detroit continues to win. The Flyers blow it. Teams squander opportunities. And we have a 1,000th game skater. Get ready for another episode of Locked On NHL Game Night.
When that final horn sounds, you know it's time for Locked On NHL Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. Prepare to experience game day reactions like never before, only on Locked On NHL Game Night. Your team every day.
Welcome inside another edition of Locked On NHL Game Night. I'm Mike Osti here, a digital journalist in the Pittsburgh market, most notably with Yardbarker and SiriusXM. And I'm joined alongside TJ Shelott, who is a professional hockey play-by-play and, of course, a part of the team here with Locked On NHL Game Night. We had a decent slate here, TJ. I mean, 90% of this thing, we're both on the East Coast, didn't kick off. The puck didn't drop, for a better phrase here for Hockey Show, until after 9 o'clock. But we had one at 7. Entertaining games, though, nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean,
worth staying up for, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, more than half of these games went into extra time. So, I mean, you can't wish for a better hockey night than that. I mean, and they were competitive all the way through. I mean, there's nothing worse than when you have 10 games on the schedule and all of a sudden, 6 or 7 of them are blowouts.
Are you hinting that maybe just happened?
Happened a couple nights ago.
TJ just experienced it for sure. But once again, Mike Othie, TJ Shelott, it is Locked On NHL Game Night. Welcome to Locked On NHL Game Night, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 podcast network. And as I said, and this is cliche, but it's very fitting on this night, we experienced a mammoth comeback. And for full disclosure, I was getting ready to throw in all the graphics in our little graphic there in the corner that the Flyers poured it on Utah because they were early in this game. They jumped out to a 2-goal lead within that first minute. They had a 3-0 lead in this game, and they are fighting for their lives. And yet Utah managed to galvanize themselves. They managed to pull this victory out. They do it at 5-4 in overtime. A nice win for Utah. They certainly have a lot of fight in them, and a real bad loss for Philadelphia, to say the very least here. What does this game say to you about the Flyers? Are they a for real team that can keep hanging in there? They've been dropping a lot of games like this, but yet they're still players based on where they are in the standings.
I think he said it great at the open. They blew it. I mean, this was a game where they had it in hand. Like you said, they were up 3-0 at one point. They were up 4-2 at the end of 2, and they were in complete control of this game until they weren't. And that's why I think Philadelphia is not necessarily one of those playoff teams that I think is going to ultimately punch their ticket to the postseason, just because I don't know if they have that mental fortitude. This was a game they should have been able to put away, but they just let Utah hang around. And credit to Utah. I mean, they battled back. They're a team that wasn't going to, just go into the good night softly. They weren't going into that third period going, well, we're down 2 goals, so this game's over. Credit to them. But Philadelphia, they should have snuffed this out midway through the third period, found the back of the net to get that insurance goal, make it a 3-goal game. They just didn't. They fell apart in that third period, and that's why I don't trust them as a playoff team.
Yeah, I don't really trust them either. I've said this several shows back here, really, since we started with Locked On, that Philadelphia is one of those teams that they feel like that they're going to drop off, certainly after the Olympic break. We did a show, who's going to be in or out after the Olympic break, because it's a weirdness to this season didn't occur in recent years. And they feel like they're a team that's going to drop out. They're still hanging in there. And fortunately for them, a team looking up at in the Islanders also had a rough day at the office here tonight that we'll get into later on. But it just feels like they're going to drop off, and they're missing these opportunities in games they should win, certainly when they have a big lead like that. And to the victor goes the spoils, and maybe they didn't have the first word of our conversation, but we have to talk some Utah hockey as well, for sure. They managed to fight and get this victory. What do you make of this Utah team? I mean, they're a team that maybe some thought could be entertaining coming in the year. Offensively, they usually are. They haven't really been fully 100%. Usually defense is an issue. They've kind of been up and down this year. I mean, they're a team right now that if you look in the standings, right through 50 games played, they do have 56 points, 26 victories. They are hanging in there as well in the West.
Yeah, I think they're starting to find that identity a little bit. You look at even tonight's game, outside of Clayton Keller getting the 2 goals, just some good spreading of the wealth, right? You're getting JJ Paterka on the board. Lawson Krause scores tonight.
Depth.
Barrett Hayden scores on the power play. I mean, this was just the 6th goal of the year, and he's getting some power play minutes. He's getting out there. They do have some good depth. They do have some good chemistry there. I do like their goaltending as well. I think Vamelka, if he can play at the top of his game, they're going to be pretty difficult. I think they'll sneak in as a wild card team. That's where they sit right now. They're ahead of, the plucky San Jose Sharks who last night, but I think they're going to fall off a little bit. And falling off, Philadelphia, I mean, look, they've lost 7 of their last 8. Sam Ersson, he played really well in his last game, then comes out and kind of lays an egg in this one. They have no Dan Vladar, still injured. There's just too many questions there. But I think Utah, they're probably a one and done in the playoffs if I had to speculate and make a guess, but I do think they get in. They're a solid team. They've got some good depth.
Yeah, they're a team that they're far from who they're looking up at in their division, but they're a team that certainly looks like a wild card team. There's a lot of depth there, even if they don't maybe jump off the page for you with a superstar. You mentioned San Jose. You have Celebrini, who is somebody that maybe can carry you through games, and he's won games on his own this year. Utah doesn't really have that, but if they get goaltending and they just have a lot of fight and it's a great atmosphere over there, I mean, for an expansion franchise to really have this situation so soon, and we've seen that a lot in recent years, of course, with the NHL, with what Vegas was able to do right away, of course, and even Seattle, and they played hockey tonight as well, so they were also able to move in the right column on this night. And another team, TJ, that is moving in the right direction, and they haven't been for almost a decade now, and there's pressure to finally get this done now. And the beloved son of Steve Yzerman, and I'm talking about the Detroit Red Wings, was facing the heat for probably the first time since he first stepped foot in Detroit after being drafted back in the 80s. He's been beloved ever since. But there were some Red Wings fans and media that were starting to criticize him. He sat in his hands last year despite being a fringe team, didn't make any moves. He's been in love with draft picks, wanting to do this through the draft. You do bring in Patrick Kane. He gets his 500th goal this year. But this Detroit team, now over 30 wins on the year. They're fighting for a division title, even though Tampa Bay is not easy to deal with. And they get another overtime victory against another Eastern Conference foe they're going to be fighting with in terms of points and positioning in the Toronto Maple Leafs. And before we fully get into it, let's now check in with our Locked On Red Wings host. The Victor will get to lead this one off. We actually have videos from both hosts from this game as Detroit pulls out another one. So the refuse to lose Red Wings once again refuse to lose.
Seider wasn't on everybody's radar as a sneaky Norris candidate. He is now. He puts on a masterclass defensive game all night long against the Toronto Maple Leafs, shutting down everything in the defensive zone from start to finish. And then in overtime, makes a big boy play, just absolutely overpowering Easton Cowan, forcing a turnover at the Leafs blue line, and goes in, passes the puck to Larkin, who finishes it. This gives the Red Wings a 2-1 win and their first season sweep of the Toronto Maple Leafs since joining the Eastern Conference, and their first ever since 2011-2012. First in a long time for the Detroit Red Wings in a season sweep of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Outside of that, John Gibson was phenomenal. Another 30-save performance by him. His goal saved above expected was 2.68. I know his season save percentage is still like 903, 904, but since December 1st, only Ilya Sorokin has been better. He's sneakily getting into that Vezina conversation, too, if he continues to play like this throughout the rest of the season. He has been fantastic. Red Wings win 2-1, and man, good times in Hockey Town.
Good times in Hockey Town is right. I don't know about Vezina just yet, but before we can fully unpack that, let's check in with our Locked On Maple Leafs host. Little different tune, although I've heard this song and dance before on these shows from Toronto.
Another night, another overtime loss for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm David Morcity from the Locked On Leafs podcast, and it was a disappointing result for the Leafs, who really, in a lot of cases, want to avoid a potential 3-point situation against the Red Wings, who they are chasing in the Atlantic Division. Unfortunately, the Leafs dropped the overtime point, allowing Dylan Larkin to score after Easton Cowan had gone stripped of the puck. Unfortunate play, a lot of self-inflicted wounds for the Leafs in this game. Scott Laughton did score. Joseph Woll looked pretty good in net, but unfortunately, this loss also carries a bit of baggage as Oliver Ekman-Larsson was forced to leave the game in the first period. Don't really know too much about what that injury could be. Mike and I will break it all down on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, TJ, first off to Detroit. How good is this Red Wings team? It's a simple question, but the reason why I ask it, obviously going into this year was about getting in the playoffs and now be a successful year to break this 9-year drought. It almost feels like now just getting in and then that being it and being happy you're there, that's not going to be enough anymore. I mean, they're beating everybody they have to beat. They're playing so well. They certainly, if they get the right matchup, can win a playoff series. And their fans are going to start expecting that now. I don't know about Gibson for Vezina, but if he keeps playing like this, which is why they brought him there to finally get a goaltender that they haven't had in a while, they can beat anybody. They didn't get this goaltending from him early in the season, which is why I don't necessarily want to give him these awards. But just how good is Detroit for you? Are they an actual contender to have a deep run, let alone just get in the playoffs finally?
Yeah, I think they'll probably go 2 series, and it all's going to hinge on their offense. When you look back, this is their third consecutive win. There's 7 wins in their last 8. When you look at those wins across the board, outside of tonight, they're scoring 4+ in every single one of those games. They figured it out offensively. They beat the Senators 4-3, the Sharks 4-2, Hurricanes 4-3. They shut out the Canadiens 4-0, Canucks 5-1, Senators 5-3. So their offense, they have figured it out. Now, that's completely a stark contrast to what we see here tonight. Obviously, it was a low-scoring game, and this was an insane game in the sense that there was 72 total shots in this game, yet there was only 3 goals. So you want to talk about goaltending. If you love watching the guys wearing pads do their thing, this was the game for you. And, for Toronto...
You're a former goaltender, right? So you probably...
I am. These are the games that
yeah.
Even when you lose as a goaltender, you'll never admit this to your teammates or to the fans or to anyone, but deep down inside you go, I played really well. I deserve that win, even if you lose. I mean, on the other side for Joseph Woll, he was 39-41.
39
how do you feel bad about that? It's pretty incredible there, but for Toronto, it was a game of blown chances. We heard about Scott Laughton. He had his 7th of the year. Yeah. He also had a penalty shot here tonight. He doesn't even get a shot off. He just flubs the stick handle on his way in. That was I don't know. Maybe something was in the air tonight. If you were a former Flyer or a current Flyer, you were just going to flub something, because we didn't even talk about in that Utah game how Garnet Hathaway had an empty net in the 3rd period with a minute and a half left to go and just never got a shot off. Same thing happened a lot in here tonight on the penalty shot. It was just a night of missed execution for Toronto. Both defenses, I'd love to say played well, but because you look at the score and you go, well, they must have played well. They didn't. I mean, there's 72 total shots in this game, and there was a ton of block shots too. Each of them were in the high teens in block shots. So there could have been even more that made their way in on the goaltender. So this was really a game about just strategy, and Detroit, they are a well strategized team. They're finding their offensive stride behind guys like Larkin, who's now got 25 on the year. They've just got team. Very well coached team. They've just got to keep that up. That's going to be the trick, getting through the Olympic break. On the other side, there's still 2.5-3 months of hockey to be played after that. Got to keep it up.
Yeah, and we've seen them a couple years ago kind of do this. Maybe not this good, but do this and then blow it and fade. That's what they've been doing for several years, which is why the fans wanted a move, thinking that it would jumpstart them. We will see what gets injected. I'd imagine here to be borderline malpractice if they are not buyers at this deadline. So something is going to be added to this team that already right now looks like they can win a series or two. And the nicest thing about what Detroit's doing right now, separate from winning, if you're a Red Wing fan, they are now shooting the freaking puck. Because if you recall, we are only a few weeks removed from their back-to-back run against the Penguins. And in one of those games, they had 12 shots on net. 12 shots on net is not winning. That is not going to get it done. 12 shots on net, guys. That is just insane work. Like, you borderline might as well not even have shown up to work that day. So that is behind them now. That, yes, the offense isn't really there to what they want with only 2 goals, but 30 shots on net, 39 shots on, 40 shots on net in some of these games. That's what you want. 41 in this one. 12 isn't going to get it done. We will be back after the break and some more teams squandered opportunities, and that's an understatement here. Again, it's Locked On NHL Game Night. TJ and Mike will be back after this. And once again, back with you here, Locked On NHL Game Night. But if you ever tried to hire someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is? Well, when you want candidates who truly fit the match you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. So we're talking to you, employers. This will help you get the right candidate for your company. If I need someone to hire fast, if I need someone for this job now, I go straight to Indeed and be very specific in what I want and what I need, that real experience, not just any resume buzzword. I've used Indeed to hire people in my career and to work under me, and it's been a home run opportunity so far. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored jobs credit. 75% might be better, but $75 credit is obviously still great, depending on the number and the total cost there. Credit to help your job premium placement as it deserves at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support the show by saying you heard all about this from Indeed, from us, and you are going to use Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Once again, Mike, TJ, we're back here, Locked On NHL Game Night, and moving down the docket here, we had 6 games on this evening, and this one at one point, full disclosure, pull back the curtain, was going to be the headline game before we saw that Mammoth comeback. Anaheim gets the overtime victory over the Avalanche, and Alex Killorn ends up skating in his 1,000th game. He didn't impact it too much more than that monumental achievement for him, and we, of course, know him from the Tampa Bay Lightning dynasty days. And Anaheim got the win. They're still hanging around, but TJ, we're starting to get more of the story of these Avalanche overtime losses and the Avalanche being exposed as of late. They're not full strength anymore. They were on a record pace earlier in the season. People were talking about the single season wins record and points record, etc. All of that feels like it's gone by the wayside. They're still a good team. They're going to be in the playoffs. No one wants to face them, but we are seeing a different Avalanche team here in the year 2026. This is their 5th loss of the month. They've lost 3 out of 4. They've been exposed, and that's now an understatement.
Yeah, this is a team, I think, that unknowingly is giving out the blueprint in how to beat them. And it's going to be the best teams in the league that are watching these games that will figure that out and will deploy that later in the season, maybe to get into the playoffs for themselves or to beat Colorado in the playoffs if that's the playoff matchup, but this was a tale. They're both injured teams, right? No Landeskog, no Taves for Colorado. On the other side, no Troy Terry. Mason McTavish is still injured for Anaheim. But this was really a tale of two goaltenders. You have Lucas Dostal, 40 saves on 41 shots, and he gets the victory. And then on the other side, Scott Wedgwood only saw 17 shots. He was 16 of 17. So that kind of tells you, just looking at the box score, if you want to, 30,000 foot view this, that can tell you right there how these two teams were playing. Anaheim was basically just fighting off Colorado the entire game. Colorado was throwing everything at Anaheim. They got solid goaltending and they snuck away with the win. It's basically telling you that if you can skate with Colorado, if you can keep up with their speed, you will be able to outlast them. Jeffrey Viel got the lone goal for Anaheim in this one, just his second of the year. Arturi Lehkonen scored on the other side for Colorado. I know that they would expect, especially for how good this Colorado team is, if you're putting 41 shots on goal, you better have a better shooting percentage than what they ended up with tonight.
Yeah, Nathan MacKinnon, 3 shots, doesn't connect, not a point in this game. And that's really the nail on the head in terms of skating with them, because earlier in the year, way back in 2025, it appeared no one could skate with them. And then now, a couple weeks later, into this new year, it does appear that pretty much everyone can skate with them, which is odd, because I'm not saying everyone can compete with them, but they've been a little different in this year, and everyone goes through these peaks and valleys. I'm sure they're going to kickstart and get back going again. I'm sure that if this was a series, they would probably end up winning it, but there's no guarantee that even a special, great, historic year in the regular season leads to a Stanley Cup. It is the unique sport that gives you a gauntlet of the postseason. You got to be built for that. We've seen many record-setting regular seasons not lead to a championship year, and it's championship or bust for this Avalanche team. They won it several years ago. They want to do it again with MacKinnon. And when you start out as strong as they did on a record pace, it's all about the playoffs and winning that championship. And right now, it's far from a guarantee that they're going to get that done. Certainly, if they don't pick it up from what we're seeing now, and maybe getting healthy will be that jolt for them. We will see what happens. But another loss for the Avalanche. Yes, it's in overtime. Yes, they hang in there and do get a point out of it, and stacking points is still a positive for them, but another one. And that's not what you want to see if you're an Avalanche fan. Anaheim, for you, are they legit, or are they just still pesky? I guess is the question.
They're bouncing back, right? They were one of the better teams in the league going back about a month and a half ago, and they hit this little bit of a rough patch. And like you said, every team's going to go through their peaks and their valleys. They're going to have their ebbs and flows. And whether you're Anaheim, whether you're Colorado, probably more so for Colorado, you don't win the Stanley Cup without seeing some kind of adversity throughout the season. You don't win your first game of the year, then become the best team in the NHL and just ride that wave all the way to lifting Lord Stanley's Cup. That just doesn't happen. You have to deal with some stretches, of losing, some injuries, because that's what teaches you, that's what galvanizes you and gets you to move further. If the season was too easy, you'd never make it. And whether you're Anaheim or Colorado, they both have seen some adversity. Colorado more so recently, Anaheim on the upswing.
Yeah, and team not on the upswing, the New York Islanders here. They lose this one 4-1 to the Kraken, kind of similar in not to say a blown game, but reminiscent a little bit of an Eastern team fighting for a playoff spot. Philadelphia blowing it to the Mammoth, and then you go out there west again. Another Western Conference foe gets really an upset victory over the Islanders, but they had this game pretty much in the bag early on and had control of it throughout. This is a big missed opportunity again for the Islanders, and I feel like we've been saying that a lot this year, despite them still hanging around. So what's your takeaway here? Is it more about Seattle, or is it more about a missed opportunity for New York?
I think it's a little bit of both. In this particular game, I think Seattle had more to play for with this victory. Now they have the second wild card spot in the West, and I know there's still plenty of hockey to be played, but you always want to at least own a playoff spot if you can. On the other side, for New York, I mean, you're on the road, you score the game's first goal. That's what they tell you got to do, and then they just come out flat from there, and they allow Seattle to score the next 4, and it just becomes compounding problems for them. And, whether it was Matty Beniers or Vince Dunn, Capo Caco, Jared McCann. Again, you're seeing the spreading of the wealth from this Seattle team. I think their big crux is going to be goaltending. They're one of the better teams in the league when both Decord and Grubauer show up. In this case, Grubauer played a great game, 24 of 25. Decord has been a little bit shaky as of late, and I know, he is one of those guys that really likes to ride momentum. So you get him a shutout, 2-3 wins in a row, he'll get real hot and he can become very, very dangerous. But, in this case, I think the Islanders, I don't want to say they're complacent. That's not exactly the right word. They know how tough that Eastern Conference is going to be, but they've been in a playoff spot for quite a while, and everything below them hasn't kicked them out yet.
Fair.
So
we talked about the Flyers blowing it and teams blowing it. I mean, this was another opportunity for Philadelphia. I mean, if they would just hung on and got a victory, this would have been a great night for Philadelphia and the Flyers, and that's even more reason why it's disappointing in general. Again, TJ Shilhut, Mike Osti here, Locked On NHL Game Night. And this probably would have been blasphemous even a few years ago, and I felt weird doing this. But the Penguins and Capitals are in our third segment. We will get to them in a moment. It's crazy that it's just against the laws of the hockey gods the past 20 years. But that's where we are right now. And one of those teams at least gets the job done. The other one, not so much. Thank you for making Locked On NHL Game Night your first listen of every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Club. It is in our own. It is full-on access to everything you could imagine. So it's right here for you, right at your fingertips. It's in our hands and provided to you, and access to ad-free audio to your favorite Locked On NHL show, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. Invite members to also join you along for the ride. And the Locked On Everydayer Club also has a Discord service where you can talk and chat with the Locked On hosts. Maybe ourselves will be a part of those conversations. And it includes a group chat. It includes conversation with other listeners of the shows and hosts, of course, and a whole gathering all together to make that a full-on family atmosphere. So check out the Everydayer Club. And, of course, continue to like, subscribe, and check out Locked On NHL Game Night and our entire Locked On NHL channel. Now, as I mentioned, Penguins Caps, they're going to be here in the third segment. Crosby and Ovechkin, they're not leading off this one. The Pittsburgh Penguins, though, get a 4-1 victory over the lowly Flames. It's what they had to do. It looked a little funky early on, but they eventually pull away and get the dub. And the Penguins are a team that, no one really thinks they're going to be there in the end. I'll tell you, even in Pittsburgh going into the year, no one thought they'd be a playoff team. Everyone thought they'd be rebuilding this year. The conversation is now, are they buyers or are they sellers? Even though Kyle Dubas really probably secretly and kind of said this really wants to sell this year and then wants it to be a process. Crosby, of course, doesn't want to hear that. And he's not going anywhere, but he doesn't want to hear that. He even said it outside of a season ticket holder's house that, hey, this is pro sports. I don't want to hear that. But now they keep on getting victories, even though this one's kind of a gimme win. And they're in enough of a position that they kind of maybe would force his hand to go off script a little bit. How for real are the Penguins? It's impossible to gauge off a victory over the Flames, but still, they're far from out of it. I mean, right now, they're in a playoff spot if the season ended today.
Yeah, second place in the Metro. I mean, I do not envy Kyle Dubas because he is in a sticky spot. You want to add pieces, but you also don't want to mortgage the future on a team that's built the way this one is,
Right. This feels like there's no chance to win a cup here, but you got to get him in if you can get him in, I guess.
Exactly. And so that's why I probably expect more trades like what we saw with the Jari Skinner swap, where you kind of are getting, like for like, just that new scenery, hoping to get something out of them. I mean, in this game, they were just opportunity merchants. It was 2-0. Calgary makes it 2-1 thanks to Igor Sharangovich. He scores with 3 seconds left to go in the second period. So normally, look, they tell you when you score in that final minute and you go in the locker room, you've got all the momentum. Even though Calgary's down a goal at this point, they've got all the momentum. Pittsburgh just comes out in the third, scores 50 seconds into the third period to just get, no, this is our game. We won. Thank you very much. Tack on the empty netter. So it was probably a little worse than the scoreboard says, but Pittsburgh, if you want to make a deep playoff run, you've got to beat teams like Calgary, 7th in the Pacific, although that's a little misleading because they are only 6 points out of a playoff spot.
Yeah, they had a great December, won 9 games in December, right?
Exactly. There's just a million teams in front of them, because it's so packed out there with Seattle, San Jose, LA, all kind of fighting for that same spot.
Yeah. I mean, Calgary is not going anywhere, and you could even argue this is a little bit of a win for them as well, because I know some of their fans are a little bit, what are we doing in December? Like, we don't really want to win this year. We're not going to go far anyway. Best for us not to win. You're getting back to that now. And to the Penguins' credit, yes, they exposed Calgary towards the end, and the talent eventually wins this game, and they toy with them for a while, but Malkin and company, Malkin scores in this one. They eventually get the victory. But they've also had wins against contending teams in the East. As I mentioned earlier, they dominated Detroit in a little mini series recently. They're going to have much more of that to come after the Olympic break. You're going to see those teams in those baseball series, weekend series, in that final month or so of the season. So there's going to be opportunities there. If we both don't think Philadelphia is going to stay, and we've seen Detroit blow it before, Capitals clearly, we'll get to in a moment, look like they got a whole world of problems to deal with. There's definite room for the Penguins to get into the postseason at minimum, and that's going to be the expectation. Again, it'll be very interesting. They are the most interesting team to watch at the deadline for me, and I'm not even saying that because I'm in Pittsburgh and I've covered the Penguins. It's the fact that the plan was to sell. They can't do that now. I mean, I'm not saying they have to sell. They have to buy the farm, and as you mentioned, maybe it'll be more of kind of quasi buy deals, but not giving up too much, almost maybe trying to fool Crosby. If you're Kyle Dubas, like, I'm going to buy, but like, I'm not going to, it's not going to be a Marian Hossa type of move here from a decade and a half ago. Maybe we'll at least see those, but does Erik Karlsson get shipped out of there based on this situation now? I mean, that really was the plan going into the year, that at the deadline he'd be moved. And the teams are, of course, going to want him regardless of the contract situation. His hands might be tied the way this team is playing. They're definitely playing better than he would have thought. And before we get to the Caps here and then wrap up the show, I will give some time here to the Locked On Flames host who pops in for us despite another loss and probably another expected result for the Flames.
Martin Pospisil was back for the Calgary Flames. It was probably the only bright spot in the sea of red on Wednesday against Pittsburgh Penguins. Calgary had been playing really well when allowing 30 shots or less. Not the case. They only allowed 25 against the Penguins on Wednesday, but only put up 19 of their own. It was single digits for a really long time in that game for Calgary in terms of shots on goal. Not the result you'd expect to see. Calgary had played really well against teams from the Metropolitan coming into this matchup, including beating the second place Islanders in the matchup over the last weekend, and then just really didn't show up against Pittsburgh after beating the Penguins in Pittsburgh to snap a 6-game winning streak for the Pens earlier this year. So not a lot of positives to pass along. We'll try to find something Calgary can focus on going into their weekend matchups with the Capitals and the Ducks on Thursday's edition of Locked On Flames.
Not a lot of positives to pass on. I feel like there's going to be some words he'll be saying quite a bit throughout the rest of the year. And it almost slipped my memory that, they did beat the Penguins not too long ago. So maybe there was some revenge factor here for Pittsburgh as well that put some pep in their step. Now, TJ, I can really ask a simple question here. Now, of course, the Canucks, the lowly Canucks, beat the Capitals. What's going on with Washington? What's going on?
Well, I think, again, this comes down to you've got a Washington team that's in the middle of a Midwest or a Western road trip swing, so they're going to be a little bit fatigued. Vancouver jumps out to a 4-3 lead. They take this one 4-3. They have a 4-0 lead, and they allow Washington to battle their way back. So I think that right there kind of just tells you have a very bad Vancouver team. They snap their 11-game losing streak. They get this victory to break that up. Sure. Washington, on the other hand, though, they have lost their last 4, and you're starting to see some of that fatigue set in, not only because of this long road trip, but also because of just the length of the season. I'm not ready to write off Washington just yet. I think they
Okay.
rebound after the Olympics, after they get a little bit of a break. But I have a question for you.
Sure.
Would you rather lose like Philadelphia, how they lost tonight, where you have that game in the bag and you flub it away, or would you rather lose like Washington did, where you're down 4-0, you score 3 unanswered and make it a game and make it a push at the end?
Yeah, so it's an easy answer. You don't want to lose the way the Flyers did. Like the way the Capitals lost is the better way to lose, as weird as that sounds. However, the only issue is what you said. This is not an isolated incident. They've now lost 4 games in a row. Yes, one was to the Avalanche, but they've also lost to the Eastern Conference teams. They're not taking advantage of opportunities that they could take advantage of to move up in the standings, that at least to the Penguins' credit, they are when in these scenarios. And you got to get wins against teams you're supposed to beat. The Penguins beat the Flames here. The Islanders didn't beat Seattle. And I think a Vegas bet would have said that this is the most of guaranteed victories of anybody who skated tonight, the Capitals versus the Canucks. And yeah, the travel maybe, but there's been too many of these results. And the only advantage, I guess you could say, of maybe the Capitals hanging around longer after the Olympic break and fighting into that final weekend that, say, the Flyers don't have, or maybe there's even concern for Detroit, who's clearly at top of the standings, but they faded before. The Capitals have Alexander Ovechkin. And yes, he's older now, but we've seen him do this in recent years where he kind of stabilizes. He's still scoring goals. He's still really the best player, most impactful player on that team. Kind of under the radar this year with a 20-plus goal season again, an NHL record for as many years as he's done it. They've lost games when he's scored, though. But we've seen him in that spring second half just go guns blazing and just be almost Ovechkin in his prime. We've seen that in recent years, even at his age. Maybe he has one more of that in him. And if he does that one more time, then they're going to be a problem and they're going to be hard to play. And they're going to have these series with these teams they're fighting with, and they're likely going to get in. So that there's something different about Ovechkin in the spring. It's always been that way, even before the playoffs. He turns that switch on again. Everyone has to worry about that.
And he needs to, because it gives someone for other teams to focus in on, because right now it seems like Washington, every game out there, there's 1 or 2 guys that is doing all of the heavy lifting. In tonight's game, Dylan Strome, 3 points, 2 goals, and 1 assist. Jacob Chychrun had 3 points the other night in their loss. Ethan Frank had a pair of points the other. It's just, there's no, I know I'm kind of beating this dead horse, but there's no, sharing of the wealth. There's no depth.
No,
it's just like
100%.
1 or 2 guys come out, play really well, and maybe they get the win out of that. Maybe that's enough. But on most nights, it's not. And that's where you need Ovechkin. He doesn't even necessarily have to get on the stat sheet so much, but he's just got to become that animal that we know, like you said, in the spring, and start to get teams cheating over to his side, paying attention to him, and the other players will be able to take advantage.
Yeah, he's a presence out there. Got an assist in this game, 2 shots, did not score. And it's also been a problem that when he doesn't score, they very rarely win. And that shouldn't still be going on, because they're clearly planning for the future after Ovechkin. He's not going to play forever. And it does feel like there's a lack of identity there, that who knows how they'll be when Ovechkin does hang up those skates, because they are still relying on him so much. TJ, it's been a fun ride here. We had a lot to talk about on this wild NHL Wednesday, so mid-hump day type of show here on Locked On NHL Game Night. And if you want complete coverage of your favorite NHL team, there's a Locked On NHL Team podcast here and YouTube show for you. We have one for every team in the league, because we have one all across the board. And this show, Locked On NHL Game Night, is here for you each and every night of the regular season and the playoffs, wrapping up the night in the NHL. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment on this show. Comment on a comment if you like somebody else's comment. It'll all help us here at Locked On NHL Game Night. And again, make sure to subscribe. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On NHL Game Night. For TJ Shalat, I'm Mike Osti. Thanks for listening and watching Locked On NHL Game Night, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day.